اللهم صل على محمد لمحمد واجب وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى يوم الدين. Shahr Ramadan is the month of the Holy Qur'an. And with all the virtue of reciting the Holy Qur'an has, most importantly is reflecting and thinking about the Qur'an and then being able to act upon the Holy Qur'an. So therefore, even though reciting has reward, but does just reciting without reflection, can it change someone? So we're looking for change in this holy month. We're looking to become a better person, a better Muslim, a better believer. And this happens with thinking. This happens with using our rationality. Because this is one of the main differences between mankind and animal, is that God has given us a great intellect, a beautiful mind, so that we can base our actions on the intellect. So therefore, even if you think of one verse in the day of Shahr Ramadan, one day, one verse, and you ponder and ponder and ponder about this verse, this will for you be a blessing for that day, because your mind opens up. When your mind opens up, just that thinking is equal to 1 year of worship. Thinking is one of the great actions of Abu Dhar. They say Abu Dhar, what was one of his great actions was he would think a lot. So the more we're trying to increase our knowledge, we're trying to, inshallah, educate ourselves, bring our literacy higher, and make ourselves very logical, very rational Muslims. Because the problem with today's society is that people do not base their decisions on their mind and logic and rationality. They base their decisions on their desires or impulse, or what is something that is spontaneous happens. And that is what leads man to destruction. So we are training and learning to be thinkers, to be theologians, to be philosophers, and to be able to think about the world, to think about God and the creation of God. And this, I think, is one of the biggest differences of Islam and other religions, is the emphasis that Islam has on knowledge and learning. And the fact that tonight we'll be talking about this, that the Qur'an has scientific miracles in it, that people that were physicians, doctors, or whatever field they were in, if it's, for example, geology, or other sciences, embryology, they come to the Holy Qur'an and they see that how can the Holy Qur'an talk about a concept that was just recently discovered? How can it talk about something that was 1400 years ago and mentioned, and yet science had not proven that yet? So therefore we see scholars, and we'll mention it tonight, some of them, say that the Qur'an and science come hand in hand. But when we compare other holy books, other books of religion, the problem is that scientists usually oppose these ideas. Philosophers oppose these ideas and they say that this cannot be true. But yet actually the Qur'an enhances and encourages. That's why we had so many Muslim scholars that were scientists, that were inventors. So therefore we should learn from this, and it should encourage us to also become, in one day as we used to be, we used to have the pinnacle of science and technology. We used to have that, to encourage us as Muslims to be at the foremost of science. And this is a great difference than other religions. We're going to go over verse 29 right now. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَمَنْ يَقُولْ مِنْهُمْ إِنِّي إِلَهٌ مِنْ دُونِهِ فَذَلِكَ نَجْزِيهِ جَهَنَّمَ كَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الظَّالِمِينَ. This verse was skipped from last night, so I just wanted to say, because we're going in order, Surah al-Anbiya, verse 29. And first you think that, and whoever of them should say, I am indeed a God besides him, that no one should recompense, that one we would recompense with hell, thus we do recompense the wrongdoer. Some people might think that this is referring to a person. If a human comes and says, I am God, and their place will be hell. But actually, when you look at it, the verse before was talking about angels. And it was saying that even if the angels, even they are granted with so much power, and therefore with so much ability, none of the angels in any way would ever claim that they're God or they're divine. So therefore, even because this home, which is plural, min hum, from them, this them goes back to the angels. So even the angels, so this is telling mankind that look, with your limited amount of knowledge, your limited amount of worship, even my angels, none of them claim to have any divine power. None of the prophets ever said that we are divine. So therefore, when you worship God, when you have knowledge of God, you should in reality be humble. And this should cause you to be more humble. Because if the reality of worship takes you away from humbleness and causes you to be arrogant, then in reality you have done nothing but come far from God. Let's recite Salawat ala Muhammad. Verse 30. أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ كَانَتَا رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Have those who disbelieved not considered that the heavens and the earth were a joined entity, and we separated them and made from everything, every living thing, from water? Then will they not believe? This verse, and actually when you look at science in the Holy Qur'an, there was a source that I looked at had 13 miracles of the Holy Qur'an according to science. Surah al-Anbiya actually had 5 of these. 5 of these miracles were Surah al-Anbiya. And very interesting, these verses that I'm going to read from you, these verses are actually verses that are right after one and another and another. So this verse 30 has 2 miracles of the Holy Quran. The first is this. Thank you. If we could increase the volume of the microphone too. Increase the volume. Thank you. Seeing here means mental and intellectual observation. Alam yara alladhina kafaru. Why don't you see? Seeing, or the Arabic here is yara, or yara, comes from ro'ya. Ro'ya means to see, but also means why don't you look in detail as well? Why don't you ponder and think with observation? Then we have these 2 Arabic words here. One is ratq, for example. And ratq means joining, cleaving together, ratq. Okay? The other we have is fatq, which means separating. So ratq and fatq. Should we give you an exam after these 15 days? We will not give you an exam, but pay attention. Fatq means separating 2 things that are joined together. So what does it mean in this verse that have those who disbelieve not considered the heavens and the earth were a joined entity, were ratq? Then we separated them and made water every living thing. When you look at this scientific miracle, and some sources say that this verse of Surah al-Anbiya verses 30, some say, again, this I'm just reading from the source, some say this is actually very similar to Edwin Hubble's proposed Hubble's law, which says all entities in space are moving away from the earth at speeds proportional to their distance, meaning that the greater the distance from the earth, the faster they are moving. So this way, this leads to this basis of the Big Bang theory. Again, nothing that I want to guarantee for 100, but I'm just saying these are some of the sources to talk about the scientific principles in the Qur'an, that things were joined together and now they are separated. And this is the theory of the Big Bang, which occurred around 12 to 15 billion years ago. Due to an explosion, at this point, the universe came to being. In 1965, the radio astronomers Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson won the Nobel Prize for the discovering that confirmed the Big Bang theory. When looking at the verse cited above, while acknowledging Allah knows best, it remains astounding that the Qur'an has already revealed the heavens and the earth were a joined entity and we separated them. So this is one astonishing fact from the Holy Qur'an. Again, very nicely, author here says, Allah knows best. The second is water, and that is in the same verse. That in Surah al-Anbiya it is revealed, we made every living thing from water. Will they not believe? Again, 2130 has two of these scientific miracles. And it was only after discovery of the microscope that it was concluded that all living things consist mostly of water after the microscope. While in the deserts of Arabia, the last thing a man could guess is that all of life ultimately came from water. So we see that actually when you look and study water and the principles of water, you see that the miracle of water lays in the fact that life itself comes from water. So water, almost all the process that makes up life on earth can be broken down into chemical reactions. And most of these reactions require a liquid to break down substances so they can move and interact freely. So these chemical reactions that happen on earth need water. Liquid water is an essential requirement for life on earth because it functions as a solvent. So therefore, Qur'an beautifully, again, 1400 years ago, talks about that everything that is alive comes from water. When you look at this, I'm going to say more scientific miracles of the Qur'an, and again, Allah knows best. It comes to our mind like the example that our great philosopher and theologian and faqih, Ayatollah Shaheed Sayyid Muhammad Baqir Sadr says about the Qur'an. He says that if you have a child in elementary school, for example, and they come home and they produce a work, for example, in terms of a literary masterpiece like Shakespeare, and in terms of, for example, knowledge like one of our books of science, you would never say that this child, this, for example, 10-year-old, 8-year-old, could write by themselves something so detailed and something so beautiful. Like for example, right now, a child, you get a child and he comes and you say, wow, this is, for example, like one of the best writers in English. You say, who helped you? Your teacher? MashaAllah, your teacher? I don't know, your teacher is Shakespeare, for example. I didn't know that. So therefore you say that they must have gone outside. He came help from the outside. And he says that in the same way, when you look at the Qur'an, and you look at the level of education of Arabia 1400 years ago, and you see this knowledge, not only science, how to have a correct civil code, how to have civil law, how to have the correct theology, philosophy, and how to guide people to becoming a better person. How could this come from such a time period, 1400 years ago, when they were the farthest at that time possibly from civilization, and they lived in tents, for example, and they were traders, but maybe a few of them were even literate. A handful of people were even literate at that time. So he says, and he argues, he says, when you see this balaghat in the Qur'an, the eloquence in the Qur'an, for example, the muhtawa and the content in the Qur'an, you say, God, this is impossible to come from Arabia at that time period. God, this must be a miracle of you. This is the correct message. Let's talk about the other verses. So we finished verses 30. Again, 30 has two of the scientific miracles. And we continue. وَجَعَلْنَا فِي الْأَرْضِ رَوَاسِي أَن تَمِيدَ بِهِمْ وَجَعَلْنَا فِيهَا فِجَاجًا سُبَلًا لَعَلَّهُمْ يَهْتَدُونَ. And we placed within the earth firmly set mountains. Rawasi is the same as Jibal. Rawasi is Jibal, mountains. We have put them, Rawasi, we have placed them firmly set mountains, and Tamida bihim, and within the earth firmly set them, lest should shift with them, so therefore nothing will shift. And we made them mountains, passes, roads, that they might be guided. وَجَعَلْنَا فِيهَا, we read the فِجَاجًا سُبُلًا. Interesting other fact about mountains, and the fact that Qur'an mentions that they are either stakes or they are in a way establishing and making the earth not move, for example. We see again another scientific miracle that Qur'an in other places says mountains are stakes. In a book of geology or geophysics, Frank Press called The Earth, it explains how the mountains are like stakes actually in geophysics. The same word stakes, stakes wasn't used here exactly, but the same thing, affixing the mountains. He uses mountains like stakes and are buried deep within the earth's surface. Question, for example, Mount Everest is about, I'll say this is in kilometers, it's 9 kilometers high. Okay? So that's about what, 6 miles, something like that, is that right? 9 kilometers, something like that. The engineers here can help me. Yes? So if it's 9 kilometers, 6 miles high, how deep is it? Quran says these are like steaks in size. Not steaks, I know that you're fasting and maybe think of steak and eggs, but not that type of steaks. Steaks, S-T-A-K-E-S. You know, like pegged inside the ground. Yes, the good thing I'm reading this after iftar. If it was before iftar, there would be a problem. And you wouldn't say the science, you would say it was one of the best miracles. The Quran talks about steaks, for example. But this steaks, because the root of the mountain of Everest, which is 9 kilometers, the root of it is 125 kilometers deep. 125. And that's exactly when the geophysics scientists mention this as stakes in the ground. Thus only reinforcing the Quranic revelation of the importance and strength of mountains on our earth. Okay? So that is the other. These are all in order. If you want to look at these, you can go through these verses of Qur'an and ponder tomorrow. So that was verse 31. 30 and 31. 32. وَجَعَلْنَا السَّمَاءَ, Allah puts all these in order. All these in order. وَجَعَلْنَا السَّمَاءَ سَقْفًا. Saqf means a ceiling. God has placed the sama, the sky, as a saqfan mahfuda, as a protected ceiling. وَهُمْ عَنْ آيَاتِهَا مُعْرِضُونَ. But yet, from its signs, they are turning away. And today we discover the atmosphere. We discover that there is this layer of gases in the different pressure in the atmosphere, which is allowing harmful radiation to be repelled, UV light to be repelled. trapping heat, warming the planet, and preventing extreme temperature. And very importantly, space rocks that are coming our way, that are hurtling towards our planet, they become protected. Earth becomes protected from them, from the atmosphere. Why? Because God has protected Sakhfan. Sama is Sakhfan Mahfuda, is a ceiling that is protected. And imagine if we did not have this atmosphere, how the earth would be with all these different meteorites and different masses of rock coming our way. So this is the other miracle of the Qur'an. وَهُمْ عَنْ آيَاتِهَا مُعْرِضُونَ 32. 33, we don't want to take too much of your time. 33, which is another miracle of the Qur'an, in order. وَهُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ وَالشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ. And He is who created the night and the day and the sun and the moon. So night, day, sun, moon, all heavenly bodies. Kullun, this is kullun, all of them. Kullun fi falakin yasbahun. All of them are in falak. All of them are in orbit and are swimming. So yes, we understand that the moon is in orbit. But recently we understood also that the sun is also moving in orbit. And if you think of the solar system like this, as actually, when you look at it in a diagram, it's moving like this. It's twirling in a way. The sun is in orbit as well. So therefore, this is verse 33. Although it was only a widespread belief in the 20th century among the astronomers, 20th century, today it is a well-established fact that the sun, the moon, and all other bodies in the universe are moving in an orbit, constantly moving, not stationary as commonly thought before. Kullun fi falakin yasbahun. And all of them are orbiting this. And here translated as yasbahun, are swimming. Orbiting, sabaha, or swimming. All of them are swimming in an orbit. So therefore, this was the last verse that we will be discussing tonight. And we come to the fact that we talked about water, we talked about the Big Bang, the universe, the spreading of the creation. 3, we talked about the sky's protection. We talked about the sun moving in orbit, talked about the mountains as stakes. We also, therefore, understand that we need to be able, without pondering over these verses, without thinking and just reading. For example, many of you read Surah al-Anbiya. How many here already have read Surah al-Anbiya? Probably before, you'll be reading it soon. I don't know if you passed it or not, but it's important to have reflection and thinking about the Holy Qur'an. And therefore, when you come to the conclusion that the Qur'an is one of the best books that can guide us towards the truth. This is the way that Maurice Bucaille, that had the book about the Qur'an and science, he actually became a Muslim by this. By studying, it says that in his life he was a Christian. He's a French doctor. And he studied the Qur'an. And therefore you see that when he talks about studying the Pharaoh's body, Pharaoh's body, and he was thinking deeply about it, and he was studying it, because he says that only the Qur'an talks about the Pharaoh drowning. And that the Gospel, Matthew and Luke, narrated only a story of the Pharaoh chasing Prophet Musa without mentioning the fate of his body at all. Only the Qur'an talked about the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh chased Musa alayhi salam in the Bahr and the sea, and he was drowned. So therefore, he researches and looks at the body of the Pharaoh and comes to the conclusion that he was drowned. It says the only book that talked about this was the Holy Qur'an. And he mentions here, it is unbelievable that Prophet Muhammad, a prophet, knew about this 1,000 years ago, while I have only just known about it after going through the body of the Pharaoh and coming to the conclusion that the Pharaoh was drowned. So therefore, he becomes a Muslim, and he has his book about the Bible, the Qur'an, and science, and mentions that the Qur'an is hand in hand with science. And this led them to the fact to believe in the many miracles, and these miracles are not just limited to these. Many other miracles and astonishing things that were not discovered until recently, and there's a list of these, and I only mentioned a few of them. May Allah inshallah make us of those that we appreciate the Holy Qur'an, and we're not those after we see these signs, we're mu'ridun, we do not turn away from the Qur'an, and that we are very proud that in every one of our homes there is the Holy Qur'an, there is this miracle. And all it needs is for us to reflect about it, think about it, and be able to study it. And hopefully our lives will be guided, inshallah, by the Holy Qur'an. May Allah expedite the return of the Imam of the age and cure all those that are sick. And inshallah, have blessings on our family members who have passed away. I wish all of you a good New Year's, a happy spring, and a good New Year's, inshallah. May it be a very good year for you, and may your New Year's always be in the Masjed and always in the worship of Allah, and the same with your progeny and your children's children, inshallah, with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ala Muhammad wa ali